Hey everybody, it's PJ from Wisconsin Air Gunners. I've got an exciting opportunity today to introduce to you the Saber Tactical chassis for the AirVenturi Avenge-X. So what we're going to do in this video is walk through the process of converting this one happens to be a bottle version, but the conversion is the same whether you have the bottle or the tube. But we're going to convert this version of the rifle into the new Saber Tactical chassis so that you'll have a step-by-step guide of how to do that if you want to pick up this chassis and convert yours. The conversion process will be similar, if not entirely the same, no matter which of the versions of the Avenge-X you have. If you've got one of the bullpups, it'll be a little bit more complicated because you'll have the trigger linkage to deal with. If you have the wood stock, synthetic stock version, it may actually be just a little bit simpler because there are fewer things that you have to detach, but we'll get you through the entire process. And you should be able to make those kind of adjustments on your own. Shouldn't be much of a problem. Why, though, might you want to convert to a Saber Tactical chassis? One of the reasons may simply be looks. I really think it looks great, not to take anything away from their original tactical design, but I do like this look. I always feel like when I'm using one of our Saber Tactical chassis products that, like, if Batman had an air gun, this is how he'd want it kitted out. But I think you want to talk more specifically about features. So starting at the front, you're going to get Picatinny rail out here on the end. Now I've tested this Picatinny rail with, let's see, I used a Spartan Javelin attachment. I used a Scandinavian airguns attachment. I used a UTG attachment. I used an Accutac attachment. All worked perfectly with this pick rail. And as you can see, it's a couple of slots, not super huge, but right out front, so you can put that bipod on there and you'll be all set. Behind that, you've got ARCA. Now this is the tube version. So tube, not bottle. With the bottle version, this actually comes straight out here. So what you're going to see on the tube version is ARCA Swiss here and also ARCA Swiss here. On the tube version, or rather the bottle version, this is all just one long ARCA rail going to the front. But this got cut up in order to give you a really, let's just call it a better, more finished look. So full-length functional ARCA. ARCA is useful for putting your rig into either a tripod or using a bipod with that kind of connector. Above that and below in here, you have M-LOK. So whether you want to put rails, weights, really anything that's got an M-LOK connection, you can put on there, and you have, really quite a lot of space for that. Coming back here on both sides, you have a quick detach swivel, sling swivel attachment. So you've got that on both sides. You have all metal trigger guard. You have AR compatible grip, so you can put whatever grip you want on here. You still have access to all the controls. You don't have to change the trigger, manipulate the safety in any way. It's a direct drop in. You have a cover for this area behind the block, and that's useful because it allows you to get at your hammer spring adjustment, and it covers up the hammer spring adjustment, so it's less likely, I think it's pretty unlikely on the original, that anything bad is going to happen to your trigger string, but it is uncovered. And on the Saber Tactical version, you do get this cover. So for tuning, you would take this off, really easy, set it aside, and then do your tuning. When you're done, put it back on. And then at the back end, you really have an option here. So when they made the Avenge-X Tactical, they didn't use a standard buffer tube. They used something with a little bit different thread. What Saber's done is put an adapter in place here, so you can use the stock buffer tube and stock, or if you've got an AR-15 compatible buffer tube that you want to use, or a folding stock mechanism that's made for an AR-15, you'll be able to just forego the adapter and screw that directly into the housing. So really, you get kind of the best of both worlds. Either use the parts you already have, or add in something new and maybe you'd consider it an upgrade. I know that Saber is working on a folding buttstock, so it'll be interesting to see how that interfaces with this. But basically, if it's an AR buffer tube stock, you can put it on here. I think that pretty much covers the main feature set. So let's get this put to the side and let's start looking at the process for disassembling the stock on the Avenge-X. We have 3 main screws that are holding this action in place. One of them is right in this little hole right here. That uses a 4mm Allen wrench to get out. And then we have one on either side, and those require a 3mm Allen to take out. So I'm going to start with these 2. Don't lose the screws. And then I needed a little more leverage than my sort of L handle could provide, so I went with something with a little bit bigger grip. A T handle would work just as well. It's not in super tight, simply a matter of leverage. So this one's like that. Set that aside. Then there are 2 small screws on the bottom of the pistol grip. They're actually Phillips threaded screws, or sorry, Phillips head screws. Once you take that cover off, you'll need a 5mm wrench to take off, the grip. Now the way they've built this, the grip screw connects to a little nut right in there. So if you're not careful, when you tip this, it can fall out on you. And it's actually not a standard nut, so if you were to lose this, you might have some difficulty. It's nice because it keeps it captive and it makes it a lot easier than some of the other ways in which companies have attached AR-style grips to their air rifles. But it's not an off-the-shelf replacement, so you don't want to lose this. Make sure wherever you're putting your stuff, you get that all together. Once you have the grip off, there are 2 small screws underneath where the grip sits, and you need a 2mm Allen to take these off. So with the grip off, I'm going to move back forward to the rail. There are 2 bolts here. The rear one attaches this part of the stock to the pick rail. That's a 3mm Allen. And then there is one that connects the Picatinny to the barrel band. That's 2.5. So this guy will allow you to take that part of the action off. And then there are 4 Allens right here that are holding this rail piece on. And those look like they are 2.5. And I'm inclined to take these and wrap a little masking tape around there just to keep those all captive and together. So we're down to the part where we have just about everything disassembled. I'm going to get a castle nut wrench so we can remove this buffer tube, and I believe there's a screw under there to take this back block off. So if you've never used a castle nut wrench, this is probably the least deluxe version, but a castle nut is kind of a round, relatively deep, almost like a sleeve, but then it has cutouts, kind of like the top of a traditional castle or a rook in hockey, in chess. And this wrench has this little tooth in there, and what that's meant to do is go into that little piece and then allow you to put leverage around the nut. So once you have that nut backed off, and I'm going to back it off because I'm going to reuse this buffer tube when I build the gun back up in the Saber chassis. If you look behind here, and really the order of this doesn't matter. You could start with the buffer tube if you wanted. Hopefully you'll be able to see this, but there's 2 holes underneath where that fits in. There are 2 bolts that go forward here and connect this block to the action. So we need to back those 2 out. The wrenches I'm using, these Allens, are ball head wrenches, and particularly for this, it makes my life a little bit easier, because a ball head wrench will allow you to go in at a little bit of an angle, and unless you take this stock off, you can't get a totally straight approach to it. So a ball end wrench isn't perfect for everything, but I like it for this purpose. I think I got that one released. It's going to be so awesome because you'll be able to fast forward through all this. Okay, it may not seem like it, but those are some long screws. For your purposes, 3mm Allen to get those out. So let's put those someplace safe. And now we have the Bear Action. I'd like to say it goes without saying, and I guess I should, maybe some people feel that they need an apology, but this rifle is straight out of the box, confirmed empty, no chance of it firing because it's never been cocked. It does have a little bit of air in it, but we have confirmed that this one is safe and secure to work on. And anytime you're taking apart an air rifle, you definitely want to make sure that that is taken care of. So one of the things that you'll notice once you get this apart is that this barrel band is movable. It is also removable. There are lots of opinions. Well, there's maybe 3 opinions about barrel bands. 1, they're awesome and every gun should have them. 2, they're awful and you should get rid of them as soon as you can. 3, it depends on the gun. I'm gonna throw you my 2 cents on it, and that is, it depends on the gun. For installation of the chassis, you're going to want to move this barrel band forward or remove it. If you leave it in its original position, it's going to butt up against the Saber rail, and it's going to push up on the tank and push up on the barrel, and it's going to prevent you from having your rifle properly seated in the action properly seated in the chassis. So it needs to move forward out of the way. You can slide it wherever you want. You can remove it. And my advice would be to maybe try it both ways and see which way your rifle prefers. There are people who say you really should have a barrel band to eliminate any possibility of sag or movement or bonk. Now my barrel's been bumped, and I think you can subscribe to whichever of those you want, but for installation, you got to move it forward. Okay, so let's start talking about the chassis and the parts that you're going to get when you buy one. So the chassis have been in our possession at Saber Tactical, Donnie FL, for less than a week. And we have not arrived on the final packaging. So I'm going to tell you some what ifs. I think it's most likely that your chassis is going to come to you like this. This is a rear section and then a front section that is attached by these 2 screws. These 2 screws are going to be cinched in. And the reason it's 2 pieces is so that if you, let's say, have the tube version, because that's the less expensive one and it's the one you could afford, but later on, and you get the chassis, and then later on you want to go to the bottle version because you want more shots per fill, all you have to do is pop this off, take out these 2 bolts, get the bottle version of the front end, and then attach it, put it all back together. So Saber looked at this and wanted to be as modular as possible so that you, in the end, as the user, would have the most flexibility in how it works. Now, there's no reason you can't put this version of the chassis on the tube version of the gun. It'll just look funny because there'll be this big gap below the tube. The bottle actually sits a little bit lower. So this was sculpted to flow with the lines of the bottle. But no, there's a little blue Loctite in there. You shouldn't have to put any heat on it, but it will be a little snug when you take it off. And then the trigger guard is likely to be installed for you. If you're buying it secondhand, or a decision gets made about not installing that, you'll have a trigger guard and then 2 small screws that go in there. As I put this together, because I grabbed raw parts out of the box over at the other shop, I put a dab of blue Loctite on those screws. Red Loctite is a thing. We don't advocate using it on your air guns. There's always a reason why you might want to unscrew something that you've screwed in. Blue Loctite it holds well, but it's fairly easy to overcome if you need to disassemble. Red Loctite, you generally have to get in there and melt it, and that will impact the finish. It'll do all kinds of things. You don't want to use it. So leave the red Loctite for other people. Just go with blue. So parts-wise, you're going to have this, right? That's what the action is going to go in. This, and then you're going to have a series of screws. And they're all somewhat different. You're going to have this big grub screw, and this goes in conjunction with this adapter to allow you to reuse your buttstock from the original Tactical. If you're going to put in your own buffer tube, then you don't need this. You may still want to use this grub screw because this grub screw goes in the bottom here and locks that buffer tube in place so it's exactly where you want it. So that is one of the screws. You're going to have 2 screws with these beveled tops, and these are the screws that are going to go on the sides. Remember, we took 2 screws off of the original. Those are going to go on the sides here, and that's going to hold your action in to the chassis. Then you have these 2 button head kind of screws. One of these is longer than the other. The longer one goes in this block, and this block is what's going to go behind the action to cover up the space where you do your hammer spring adjustment. So the longer screw goes there. You have about that much sticking out of the bottom. And then the shorter of these 2 screws is going to go, let me find the spot, right in front of the trigger guard. You may remember we took a screw out of there when we built this. That's going to go in that hole, and that's going to screw into the bottom of the action. And really, it's a pretty simple matter of putting it together. So let's do that. Take your action. Fit them together. Put it upside down. Remember, it's the shorter of the two screws. And it's a 4mm hex. Okay, I'm just going to get that to bottom out. I'm not going to put any torque on it. And then I'm going to go to the side. Again, no torque. Flip it over. You want to be careful not to cross thread these. They should go in smoothly. You're talking about, you know, if you cross thread it, just think about this for a minute. It's a steel screw going into what's probably an aluminum body on the action, and you know which one's going to give out first. So don't cross thread anything. So I've got all of them in. Check. There's no wiggle. There's no wobble. Now I'm going to go back to that first one. And I'm just going to snug that down. Again, I do not want to strip anything out. And I go to one side. Back to the other side. And that is that. So let's work on this buffer tube. If you're going to reuse this buffer tube, this part might be the hardest bit of the whole thing. When you get this all apart, there's a plastic piece that comes out, and then you'll see a nut right there, but that nut is recessed into the plastic. And on the other side, if you look down it, and that's after taking this off, and if you've never taken one of these off, this allows you, you push this in, and then you can adjust it. But if you pull it all the way, you'll be able to slide it all the way off. So it just goes a little bit here, a lot like that. So this comes off. On the inside is an Allen nut, or bolt rather. And it's, I think it's a 4mm. Ooh, and the hardest part is to feed this in there so that you get it just in place to back this off. And again, a ball head wrench. And if I had a longer stem with a handle like this, it'd be way easier. But this is what I've got. So note to self, get a long T-handled 4mm. So all right, so now this is off, this whole mechanism. I can set that to the side. You've got a washer and the nut, or bolt rather, and then you can take the castle nut part off here. And now we're ready to go. With the rifle sitting in the chassis, we really have 3 things left to do. We'll tackle them one at a time, but first it's going to be to attach a buffer tube to this inlet here. It's threaded on the inside. It is threaded to mate with a standard AR buffer tube. You don't need to have a spring in there, obviously. Wouldn't do anything. I mean, I guess you could put it in there if you wanted to, but I don't know why you would. All that has to do is thread in, and when you get it all set, you take this grub screw and you can lock it in there. You can also lock it in with the castle nut wrench if you wanted, a castle nut and a castle nut wrench. Put that plate, it's recessed here so that fits up. To be honest, there's some companies that make really nice ambidextrous sling mounts that replace that plate. I mean, it is set up so that you could do any of those things. But we're going to reuse the stock that we have from the original build. So you're going to need this adapter. And this is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to screw your buffer tube in. It's knurled here so you can get decent purchase and make sure it's tight. And then all you have to do is get this thread started. And screw this in. Now, you're going to get to a point where it bottoms out and you can see what is, meant to be down on the buffer tube isn't pointing down. That's just a function of using threads. They're never, I shouldn't say never. If there's 360 degrees in a circle, 1 out of 360 times you're going to get lucky and it's going to align perfectly. But if that doesn't happen for you, Saber has included this little grub screw. And when you have things lined up the way you want them, you drop this grub screw in. Tighten that up, and it's not going anywhere. Now, you can take your buttstock and you can put it wherever you want it. And if you find that, it's just not perfectly aligned, you can loosen that grub screw, make a small adjustment, tighten it back up, and you'll be good to go. So let's turn our attention to the grip. You may use whatever AR style grip you want. It's a Saber Tactical chassis, so why not use a Saber Tactical vertical grip? The chassis itself comes with a screw. It's probably the biggest screw in terms of girth and length in the kit. This is your grip screw. So you'll want to drop this guy in there so it goes into the hole that's at the bottom. And I think this one's a 5mm, and on these verticals there's actually a slit cut out on the back there. That's where your wrench goes in. Otherwise you don't have a straight shot with a vertical grip like this. If you remember what I said earlier, steel threads and aluminum bodies, make sure that you don't cross thread this when you go in. You should feel a long period of really like no resistance as it goes in, and then at the end you can tighten it down. Look at that. All right, it would be easy to think we're done, but there is one more thing. The guys at Saber, when they looked at this, they said, we don't like this gap here. And so they built this little block to go over and protect this space. Now, why is this space a thing? Like, why is it here? The reason for that is simple. This is your hammer spring adjustment. So this is built, I'm hoping you can see that, but this is built so you have nice, easy access to the hammer spring adjustment. So all you have to do is pop this off. This isn't like structural, it's not holding anything together. Make your adjustment. You could leave it off to tune, and then when you're done, put it back. It's going to minimize how much crud gets in there, and it's going to keep that area protected, and frankly, kind of finishes off the look. So there is nothing to putting this on. Just tighten that in there. It doesn't really need very much. So there you have it, a fully installed Saber Tactical chassis. This happens to be on the bottle version, but the tube version is exactly the same. It just has a different forend. It's a chassis that was designed with the idea that your needs as a shooter will change from time to time. Some of that might be situational, some of that might be competitive, some of that might simply be preference. If you want to purchase this and you've got the tube version, and then you decide for shot count reasons you want to go to the bottle version, all you have to do is replace the front end. If you decide you want to do some NRL 22 or PRS type competition, and what you want is the gun weighted a little bit more so that it's got that kind of dead feel to it during competition, or maybe you're doing some bench competition, you've got all kinds of M-lock here, sides and bottom, so you can add that weight. If you're going out in the field and you want the rifle slung, you've got sling attachment points on both sides for QD sling attachments. You can do that. You decide you don't like this grip, or you like another kind of grip, or you want to try this grip or that grip. It's AR grip compatible. You can put whatever you want in there. This buffer tube is too loose for you. You want that wiggle out of there. Okay. Well, if you spend more money, you can get a different buffer tube with a different buttstock that is going to have a little bit less play. The rifle itself is solid. Okay. There's a little bit of play there. It's because there's tolerances, right? It's at a price point. You spend more money and you can tighten that up a little bit. Bottom line, you can make whatever changes you want to make this rifle whatever you want it to be. And if you decide, you know what, I want to jump over to a bullpup or a traditional woodstock or synthetic, AirVenturi has you covered on that too, because they've got those parts. We're just talking today about the chassis build itself. So if you have any questions about the install or anything like that, please make sure you throw those into the comments so I can get you an answer just as quick as I can. Full disclosure, I think you guys have been around the channel long enough, know that I work for Donnie FL and Saber Tactical, but this is my channel, so the opinions here are mine and mine alone. I just have access to some pretty cool stuff and I want to share it with you guys. So hopefully you're liking and enjoying that. And if you are, the great favors you can do for me are giving me that thumbs up, positive comments, tell YouTube that this content is worthwhile. Feel free to share, get your friends to subscribe. All those things help other manufacturers see that we're doing something, I'm doing something that you guys value. And as a result of that, more opportunities come my way to share more things with you. If there's other installs, builds, etc. that you'd like to see, be sure to let me know. I'll see what I can do about it. I think as far as this goes, and I'm excited about this project, I think it's something that is important for a number of reasons to get kind of Saber Tactical treatment on an AirVenturi gun. I think a lot of people are going to be enjoying their time with this chassis. And just let me know what you think, because I'm curious to see. Oh, I did want to come back to this. Your barrel band, you can move this back in if you want. You can move it a little bit more forward. And I think I mentioned before, if you wanted, you could take it off and try that. But you don't want to try and trap it under here. That'll create some fitment problems that you won't like. All right, everybody. Until the next video, please shoot safe, shoot straight, and we'll see you around.